It was supposed to be a routine diplomatic meeting at the White House. But on February 28, 2025, what started as a formal discussion between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky quickly spiraled into a fiery clash, ending in an abrupt shutdown of talks and the cancellation of key agreements. The two leaders had come together in the Oval Office to hammer out a deal, one that would grant the U.S. access to Ukraine's valuable rare earth minerals in exchange for continued American support in Ukraine's fight against Russia. But the meeting took a sharp turn when the conversation shifted from business to politics. Trump, visibly frustrated, accused Zelensky of not showing enough gratitude for U.S. assistance. "You should be more grateful," he snapped. "Because, let me tell you, without us, you have no cards to play. With us, at least you have something." Sitting beside him, Vice President J.D. Vance added fuel to the fire, criticizing Ukraine's approach to diplomacy. "I'm talking about real negotiations, the kind that will actually stop your country from being destroyed," he said, implying that Kyiv wasn't doing enough to push for peace. Zelensky, however, wasn't having it. He pushed back, making it clear that Ukraine couldn't afford to gamble on vague promises. "We don't just need a ceasefire, we need real security guarantees," he insisted. He reminded them of a past agreement he had already signed with Russian President Vladimir Putin, witnessed by France's Emmanuel Macron and Germany's Angela Merkel. "And look where that got us," he said. "So tell me, what kind of diplomacy are we talking about here?" As tensions flared, European leaders wasted no time rallying behind Ukraine. Their message was clear: Kyiv wasn't standing alone. Kaja Kallas, the EU's top diplomat, didn't hold back in her remarks. She suggested that the world needed a new leader to step up, subtly hinting at her disapproval of President Trump's stance. Her words underscored Europe's firm commitment to defending Ukraine's sovereignty. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised President Zelensky's resilience, calling him a symbol of dignity and courage. She assured that the EU remained unwavering in its support against Russian aggression. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron was blunt in his assessments. He condemned Russia's actions outright, insisting that Ukraine needed continued backing, not just in military aid, but in ensuring that sanctions against Moscow remained strong. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni pushed for urgent action, proposing a high-level summit that would bring together the US, European nations, and Ukraine to address the rapidly escalating situation. She stressed that unity was key in countering the crisis. Across the English Channel, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer reinforced Britain's dedication to Ukraine's defense, vowing to stand by Kyiv no matter what. His statement left no doubt about where the UK's loyalties lay. Over in North America, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau echoed the sentiments of his European counterparts. He reaffirmed Canada's full-fledged support for Ukraine, emphasizing the importance of solidarity in the face of Russian aggression. But Ukraine wasn't the only issue driving a wedge between allies. In recent months, friction between the United States, the European Union, and Canada had been growing, not just over Ukraine, but also over economic policies. Back in early February 2025, President Trump sent shockwaves through global markets by slapping a hefty 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports. The move directly impacted major trading partners, including Canada, Mexico, and the EU. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen didn't mince words. She called the decision deeply regrettable and warned that the EU was weighing strong countermeasures to safeguard its economy. Justin Trudeau was just as vocal. He labeled the tariffs completely unacceptable, warning that they threatened to strain a long-standing trade relationship. With both the EU and Canada exploring potential retaliatory actions, fears of a full-scale trade war loomed large. A growing number of countries, including Canada and several European nations, have introduced new digital service taxes aimed at major tech giants. The catch? Most of these companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, are American. Seeing this as an unfair attack on US businesses, President Trump didn't take it lightly. he immediately launched investigations, claiming these taxes were nothing more than a targeted effort to squeeze money out of American firms. As the world marked 3 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, international leaders gathered in Kyiv to show their unwavering support. But there was a noticeable shift in the air, especially when it came to U.S. policy. Under President Trump, Washington's stance on Ukraine had changed. Instead of rallying behind Kyiv like before, the administration was pushing for a swift end to the conflict, leaving European and Canadian leaders uneasy. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly revealed that members of the G7 were working on a unified statement to reaffirm their commitment to Ukraine. But there was a problem. U.S. officials weren't entirely on board with how to frame Russia's role in the war. This growing divide between allies made one thing clear. While the EU and Canada were determined to stand by Ukraine, the shifting position of the U.S. was causing friction. With uncertainty surrounding U.S. foreign policy, the EU and Canada had been working to strengthen their partnership, doubling down on economic and diplomatic cooperation. But even as they moved closer, another unexpected storm was brewing, this time between Washington and Ottawa. Lately, President Trump's comments about Canada had been raising eyebrows. What started as offhand remarks quickly escalated into something much bigger. For months, he had downplayed Canada's economic contributions. But then, in a string of heated posts on Truth Social, he took things to a whole new level. "We've spent hundreds of billions propping up Canada. Why? No reason at all," he wrote. "We don't need anything from them." And that wasn't all. Trump went even further, suggesting that Canada should just become part of the United States. "We have all the resources we need: energy, cars, lumber. Without our help, Canada wouldn't even function as a country." Harsh but true, he added. Then came the most jaw-dropping statement. "So Canada should become our beloved 51st state. Lower taxes, better military protection, and no tariffs. It's a win-win." Donald Trump's latest remarks have sent shockwaves across the globe, sparking outrage and raising eyebrows. His bold claims about Canada haven't just made headlines. They've signaled a dramatic shift in how the U.S. is willing to treat one of its oldest allies. Beyond talk of absorbing Canada as the 51st U.S. state, Trump has doubled down on his aggressive trade policies. "Canada has been treating us horribly when it comes to trade," he declared, announcing a hefty 25% tariff on most Canadian imports. The only exception? Energy, which would be taxed at a lower 10% rate, a move he framed as a necessary step to protect American jobs and national security. But it's not just about trade. Trump sees these tariffs as leverage, pressuring Canada to crack down on issues he claims are harming the U.S., from illegal border crossings to the flow of fentanyl. "Without tariffs, we're basically paying Canada's bills," he said at a press conference, arguing that the current economic relationship is unfair and unsustainable. While the White House insists these moves are about strengthening national security and fixing trade deals, Trump's language suggests something bigger. His repeated statements about making Canada a U.S. state aren't just offhand remarks. They're part of a larger strategy, one that blends economic pressure with outright expansionist rhetoric. In a widely shared Truth Social post, he wrote, "Canada should become our beloved 51st state. Lower taxes, better security, and finally, they'll start contributing their fair share." Trump's comments haven't just rattled politicians. They've sparked a nationwide backlash in Canada. Across the country, a wave of grassroots activism has emerged, with people proudly wearing "Canada is not for sale" hats in defiance of Trump's words. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, initially brushing off Trump's remarks as typical bluster, was later caught in an unguarded moment, revealing his deeper concerns. Speaking privately to business leaders, he was heard saying, "I have no doubt that the Trump administration understands exactly how valuable our mineral reserves are. That's probably why they keep floating this 51st state nonsense. They know what we have, and they want control over it. That's the real issue." What first seemed like a passing comment has now taken on a life of its own, fueling growing fears over Canada's sovereignty and the future of U.S.-Canada relations. For the past 2 months, President Donald Trump has been ramping up his criticism of the European Union. But now his words have turned into action. He's officially hitting the EU with heavy tariffs. During a fiery cabinet meeting on February 26, 2025, Trump didn't hold back. He announced his plan to slap a 25% tariff on imports from the EU, claiming that Europe had been playing dirty for years. The European Union was created to rip off the United States, he declared. And they've done a pretty good job of it. But under my watch, that stops now. This wasn't the first time he had hinted at such a move. Earlier that month, he warned that tariffs were coming soon, signaling his administration's frustration with what he called unfair trade policies. Trump also suggested that Britain might not be off the hook either. He hinted that tariffs on the UK were on the table, but added, "We'll see if we can work something out." The European Union wasted no time responding. The European Commission made it clear that if the US follows through with these tariffs, Europe will strike back. "We are open to dialogue, but we will protect our businesses, workers, and consumers from unfair trade practices," an EU spokesperson warned. French President Emmanuel Macron took an even stronger stance, saying that if the US imposes tariffs, Europe will immediately hit back with tariffs of its own, specifically on American steel and aluminum. Beyond just retaliatory tariffs, the EU has a powerful tool in its arsenal, the anti-coercion instrument ACI. This system, introduced in 2023, was specifically designed to counter economic pressure from other countries. If Trump moves forward with his tariff plan, the EU can use the ACI to impose new restrictions on US goods and services, effectively pushing back against what they see as economic bullying. Germany is bracing for impact. The country's central bank has warned that new US trade tariffs could seriously hurt its economy, slowing down growth for years and adding to the financial struggles Germany is already facing. Government officials are urging caution, warning against an all-out trade war with the US economy. Minister Robert Habeck made it clear that Europe isn't backing down, saying, "We are prepared to respond with our own tariffs. We won't be pushed around." If the US follows through with these tariffs, Europe has options, and they're not afraid to use them. One idea on the table? Bringing back import taxes on US goods that were previously targeted in 2018, including bourbon and motorcycles. A move that could hit key American industries hard. But not every EU country agrees on how to respond. Italy, for example, is considering handling the situation on its own. Italian Economy Minister Giancarlo Giorgetti suggested that individual nations might need to craft their own strategies to deal with the tariffs. Despite the tough talk, European leaders haven't completely shut the door on negotiations. French President Emmanuel Macron recently traveled to Washington, hoping to smooth things over. But after his visit, he sounded doubtful, saying he wasn't optimistic about avoiding new US tariffs. He also criticized the US government's misunderstanding of Europe's tax system, suggesting that Trump's administration sees value-added taxes, VAT, as trade barriers, when they're actually just a standard part of Europe's economy. While Europe battles it out with the US, Canada has been busy expanding its trade relationships beyond its southern neighbor. Canada and Europe go way back. Their trade ties stretch all the way to the 18th century, when Canada was a major supplier of fur and raw materials for European markets. Over time, this evolved into a formal economic partnership, with a major milestone in 1976 when Canada signed its first trade agreement with the European Economic Community, EEC. Fast forward to 2009, and Canada and the EU were working on something much bigger: the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA. This deal, which took effect in 2017, eliminated 98% of tariffs on goods traded between the two regions, making it easier for businesses on both sides to sell their products without extra costs. And the results have been massive. Between 2016 and 2024, trade between Canada and the EU skyrocketed by 57.5%. In 2022 alone, the EU exported nearly $50 billion worth of goods to Canada, including machinery, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and auto parts. Meanwhile, Canada sent about $30 billion worth of goods to the EU, with its biggest exports being minerals, machinery, and agricultural products. For decades, Canada has relied heavily on trade with the United States. But in recent years, it's made a conscious effort to diversify its trade partnerships. Back in 2018, the Canadian government set a bold goal to increase non-US exports by 50% by 2025. And so far, they're on track to hit that target. Beyond strengthening ties with Europe, Canada has been actively negotiating deals with other countries, including Indonesia and Ecuador, proving that it's serious about reducing its dependence on the US market and becoming a bigger player in global trade.